7 million years ago, something impossible happened. An ordinary creature, hair-covered, small-brained, indistinguishable from the animals around it, stood upright. Not by accident, not by chance, and not alone. From that single moment, the destiny of Earth was altered forever. Tonight, we will not tell a myth. We will not tell a legend. We will follow the evidence, etched into stone, buried in ancient tablets and hidden in the sudden impossible rise of mankind. This is Whispers of the World, and this is the story that history was never meant to explain. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who listens beyond the surface. Subscribe to Whispers of the World, where forgotten truths still speak. And as you listen, leave a comment telling us which country you are watching from and the time. Your voice joins the echo. Now, let us return to a world before humanity existed. The long, slow rise of the ape. For millions of years, evolution followed a predictable rhythm. Small changes, tiny improvements, mistakes corrected by time. Early hominins were not human. They were not gods. They were not special. Their brains were only slightly larger than those of chimpanzees. Their bodies were fragile. Their survival depended entirely on instinct. They didn't build cities. They did not write language. They did not dream of the stars. For millions of years, nothing changed. Stone tools remained crude. Fire was feared before it was understood. Generations lived and died without progress. 2 million years passed, and a stone spearhead barely improved. Technology crawled forward at a pace so slow that time itself seemed stagnant. This is how evolution behaves. Until, suddenly, it didn't. The moment that should not exist. 300,000 years ago, something appeared that had no right to exist. Homo sapiens. Not a gradual transition, not a smooth evolution. A leap. Brain capacity exploded. Abstract thought emerged. Language formed. Symbolism appeared. Within a geological instant, humans became something else, something designed. And then, something even stranger happened. The silence of the Neanderthals. For tens of thousands of years, Neanderthals had ruled the land. They were stronger, better adapted to cold, perfectly evolved for survival. And then they vanished. Not slowly, not peacefully. They were erased. Archaeological layers show sudden disappearance. No long struggle, no natural decline. When Neanderthals disappeared, technology did something evolution has never done before. It accelerated. The impossible acceleration. 30,000 years. That is all it took. From primitive shelters to Göbekli Tepe. A monumental stone structure built by people who supposedly hadn't invented agriculture yet. From stone circles to metallurgy, from oral stories to written language, from watching the stars to measuring them, from animal skins to space probes leaving the solar system. No other species has ever done this. No evolutionary model explains it, because evolution did not happen here. Something intervened. The ancient records agree across continents that never met, across cultures that never spoke. The same story appears. Not as metaphor, not as poetry, as record. Sumerian tablets describe gods who came from the heavens. They called them Anunnaki. Egyptian texts speak of gods who ruled before pharaohs. They descended in shining boats. Indian scriptures describe beings who travelled between worlds. They shaped humanity's fate. Native American legends speak of star people, teachers from the sky. Even the Bible, stripped of its ancient language, describes the Nephilim, Beings who walked among men. Different names, same beings, same story. The purpose of man. The ancient texts do not describe humans as children of gods. They describe humans as tools, created to work, created to serve, created to obey. The Anunnaki did not come to save humanity. They came to use it. Gold mining, resource extraction, planetary engineering. Humans were engineered, not evolved, to be the perfect workforce. Strong enough to labour, intelligent enough to follow commands, limited enough to never challenge their creators. At least. That was the plan. The forbidden gift. Something went wrong. Humans learned too quickly, thought too deeply, questioned authority. Ancient texts describe a forbidden act, or knowledge given when it should not have been. The gods feared mankind would become like them, aware, independent, dangerous, and so they decided to end the experiment. The first attempt at erasure. The flood, not a myth, not a metaphor, a planetary reset. Sumerian tablets describe it in chilling detail. So does the Bible, so do ancient Hindu texts. The gods argued among themselves. Some wanted total destruction, others felt guilt. One god warned humanity. A vessel was built. Life was preserved. When the waters receded, humanity survived. But the relationship between gods and men was forever broken. The silence after the gods. The Anunnaki withdrew, not all at once, not completely. Kings ruled by divine right. Priests spoke in the gods' names, but the sky grew quiet and humanity was left alone, with knowledge it barely understood and instincts shaped by masters who were gone. The question that remains, if humanity was engineered, if our rise was not natural, if the gods truly walked among us once, then one question remains. Did they really leave? Or are they simply waiting? We will explore the beings themselves. Who were the Anunnaki? Where did they come from? And why do ancient records insist their home was a wandering planet, a world we now call Nibiru? Sleep gently. Listen closely. The whispers are only beginning. The ancient world did not imagine its gods as distant spirits. They were not abstract forces. They were present. They arrived. They ruled. They left marks that time could not erase. The oldest human civilizations did not begin with kings or nations. They began with gods. Before there were empires, there were visitors. The Sumerians, whose civilization appeared suddenly and fully formed in Mesopotamia, didn't claim to invent their knowledge. They insisted it was given to them. Writing, mathematics, astronomy, agriculture, law. None of these were described as human discoveries. They were gifts from beings who came from the heavens. These beings were called the Anunnaki. In Sumerian, the name translates roughly to those who came from the sky to the earth. Not symbols, not metaphors, visitors. The tablets describe them with unsettling clarity. They were tall, powerful, radiant, long-lived. They wore garments that shone. They travelled in vehicles that roared and burned. When they spoke, humans trembled. The Anunnaki did not ask for worship. They expected obedience, the arrival from the heavens. According to Sumerian tablets, the Anunnaki did not originate on Earth. They came from a distant world called Nibiru, a planet described as having a long elliptical orbit that brought it into the inner solar system only once every several thousand years. Nibiru was not mythology to the Sumerians. It was a celestial object, carefully tracked in their astronomical records. They depicted it as a winged disk crossing the sky, often shown alongside symbols of authority and divine power. When Nibiru approached Earth, the Anunnaki arrived. Not through magic, through descent. The texts describe fiery chariots, thunderous landings, and structures built to receive them. Mountains were flattened. Cities were founded where their craft touched down. Humans gathered in fear, believing the sky itself had opened. To early man, there was no distinction between technology and divinity. Anything that could descend from the heavens, manipulate nature, and command absolute power was a god. The Anunnaki knew this, and they used it. Their appearance among men. Unlike later religions, the Anunnaki were not described as perfect or eternal. They argued, they plotted, they felt anger, jealousy, and fear. They were not omnipotent, they were advanced. The tablets describe them as humanoid, but larger than humans. Their blood was said to be different, containing something called the essence of life. This detail would later become crucial. Some Anunnaki ruled, others laboured. The highest among them formed a council. Decisions about Earth were debated, voted on, and enforced. There were laws even the gods had to obey. This was not a spiritual heaven. It was an administration. The purpose of Earth was not chosen at random. According to the tablets, the Anunnaki needed resources, specifically gold. Not for wealth, but for survival. Their planet, Nibiru, was dying. Its atmosphere was failing. Gold, when dispersed in the air, could stabilize it. Earth had what they needed, but extracting it was difficult. The Anunnaki initially mined Earth themselves. They dug deep into the planet, working in harsh conditions. Over time, they grew exhausted and resentful. A rebellion began not among humans, but among the gods. Lower-ranking Anunnaki refused to work. This moment changes everything. The creation of the worker, faced with revolt, the ruling Anunnaki proposed a solution. They would create a new being, a worker species, a hybrid. The tablets describe a controversial experiment, combining Anunnaki genetic material with that of early hominins already living on Earth. This was forbidden knowledge. One of the gods, often identified as Enki, supported the plan. Others opposed it, fearing unforeseen consequences. But desperation won. The experiment proceeded. Life was engineered, not born. Created, engineered, not evolved. The process described in the tablets is disturbingly technical. It speaks of wombs, genetic essence, failed prototypes, and repeated attempts. The first creations were unstable. Some could not speak. Others could not reproduce. Many were destroyed. Eventually, the formula worked. Humans were created to look like the gods, but weaker. Intelligent, but limited. Capable of learning, but not ruling. At least that was the intention. Humans were taught language. They were taught farming. They were taught obedience. They were not taught truth. The Age of the God Kings. Once humans existed, the Anunnaki ruled openly. This was not mythic time. This was history. The gods walked among humans. They ruled cities. They appointed kings. They enforced laws. Early kings did not claim power through conquest. They claimed lineage from the gods. Son of the divine. Chosen by heaven. Temples were not places of worship. They were administrative centers, storage facilities, landing platforms. Ziggurats rose not as monuments, but as beacons, connecting sky and earth. Every civilization echoed the same structure because the gods were the same. Global memory of sky gods. In Egypt, they were called the Neteru. In India, the Devas. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha, and the Star People. In the Bible, the Elohim. Different names, same descriptions. Beings who came from the sky, who taught humanity, who ruled then vanished. Civilizations separated by oceans described identical events. This is not coincidence. This is memory, the gift and the fear. Humans learned faster than expected. They began to innovate, to question, to dream beyond survival. Some Anunnaki saw potential, others saw danger. The tablets described growing concern among the gods. Humans were multiplying, spreading, thinking. They feared losing control. Knowledge once given could not be taken back. The division among the gods. The Anunnaki were no longer united. Some wished to guide humanity, others wished to limit it. A few wished to destroy it. The council debated Earth's future. Humans were no longer just tools, they were a problem. The warning signs. Strange celestial events were recorded. Shifts in climate, rising waters. The gods knew something was coming. Nibiru's return approached. Gravitational forces would destabilize Earth. The decision was made. Humanity would be wiped clean. All except a chosen few. The god who defied the council, one Anunnaki, disagreed. He warned humanity. He taught them how to survive. This act would echo through every ancient flood myth ever recorded. The gods would try to erase humanity, and they would fail. The shadow of their departure. After the flood, the Anunnaki's presence diminished. They no longer ruled openly. They withdrew to hidden places, to mountains, to the sky. Eventually, they left. Or so we were told. Humanity was left with ruins, stories, and unanswered questions, but the tablets end with a warning. The gods would return. When Nibiru returns, the Anunnaki were not myths, they were not symbols, they were visitors, engineers, rulers, creators. In the next chapter, we will uncover the moment humanity stopped obeying, the rebellion that changed everything, and why the gods feared their own creation. For a time, the arrangement worked. Humans labored, the gods ruled, Earth prospered, cities rose where once there had been wilderness, fields spread across river valleys, grain was harvested, stored, counted. Humanity learned order, hierarchy, and routine. But beneath this progress, something dangerous was growing. Awareness. Humans were no longer just reacting to the world. They were beginning to understand it. And that was never part of the design. Life under the gods. The ancient texts describe early human life with striking clarity. Humans worked in mines, fields, and construction sites. They carried stone, extracted metals, maintained temples, and served the Anunnaki elite. They were not equal partners, they were property. The gods lived separately, within sacred precincts, elevated cities, or restricted zones. Humans could approach only when summoned. Direct eye contact was forbidden. Disobedience was punished swiftly and publicly. Fear maintained order. The Anunnaki ruled not only with advanced tools, but with psychological dominance. To early humans, the gods controlled the sky, the weather, disease, and death itself. Resistance seemed impossible, yet resistance was coming. The unexpected side effect. The Anunnaki underestimated one thing: the human mind. Humans were created to be intelligent enough to follow instructions. But intelligence does not remain static. Once ignited, it grows. Humans began to observe patterns, seasons, stars, cause and effect. They learned from the gods not just what to do, but how things worked. Knowledge spread quietly, from worker to worker, from generation to generation. The gods did not notice at first. They had seen countless lifetimes pass while they themselves barely aged. To them, human generations were fleeting, insignificant. They did not realize humanity was changing. The first questions. At some point, humans began asking questions the gods had never intended them to ask. Why do the gods eat food if they are immortal? Why do they bleed when injured? Why do they argue among themselves? The tablets hint at moments when humans witnessed the gods' vulnerabilities. A wounded Anunnaki, a failed mission, a disagreement that escalated into violence. Gods were not invincible. They were powerful, but finite. This realization spread slowly, dangerously. The forbidden knowledge. According to several ancient traditions, there came a moment when humans received knowledge they were never meant to have. In Sumerian texts, this knowledge is described as wisdom of the gods. In the Bible, it becomes the knowledge of good and evil. In other myths, it is fire, language, or sacred numbers. Different forms, same meaning, awareness. Humans became capable of independent thought, of moral judgment, planning, and imagination beyond survival. The gods recognized this as a threat because awareness leads to one thing: choice. The breakdown of obedience. Once humans could choose, obedience was no longer guaranteed. Work slowed. Questions increased. Orders were followed with hesitation. Some humans began to organize quietly, in secret. The tablets speak of unrest among the workforce, complaints, refusals, even sabotage. This was unprecedented. The gods had engineered humanity to obey, but humanity was beginning to resist. The gods' response. The Anunnaki responded as rulers always do, with control. Punishments became harsher. Entire groups were destroyed to set examples. Cities were wiped out for defiance. Knowledge was restricted. Humans were forbidden from entering certain areas or learning specific skills. Fear returned. But fear was no longer enough. Once a mind has awakened, it cannot return to sleep. The division deepens. The Anunnaki themselves were no longer united. Some believed humanity had gone too far and must be reset or erased. Others believed humanity's evolution was inevitable, perhaps even necessary. One faction argued that humans could one day replace the gods. Another warned that humans would destroy everything if left unchecked. The council was deadlocked. Meanwhile, humanity continued to grow. The rise of the demigods. The ancient texts introduce a strange and troubling development: the birth of hybrid beings, children born from unions between gods and humans. These beings were stronger, taller, more intelligent than ordinary humans. They became kings, warriors, heroes. In the Bible, they are called the Nephilim, the fallen ones. In other traditions, they are giants, heroes, semi-divine rulers. They ruled humanity on behalf of the gods, but they too had human flaws: ambition, pride, cruelty. They demanded worship, they demanded loyalty. And in doing so, they accelerated humanity's resentment. The first rebellions. The tablets describe regions where humans rose up. Not openly, not yet. They fled, they hid, they refused to serve. Some destroyed temples, others abandoned cities entirely. Humanity was no longer unified under divine rule. The gods responded with force. The era of destruction. Ancient records describe periods of devastation that archaeologists still struggle to explain. Sudden, city-wide destruction. Burned layers without evidence of war. Abandoned settlements with no signs of famine. The gods were enforcing control. Weapons described as thunderbolts, fire from the sky, and voices that could kill with sound appear across cultures. These were not metaphorical punishments. They were technological. The god who sided with man among the Anunnaki, one figure stands apart: a god who favoured humanity. In Sumerian texts, He is Enki. In other traditions, he appears under different names. He believed humanity deserved to live. He believed they were more than tools. Quietly, he helped them. He taught them survival skills. He warned them of coming dangers. He protected them from total annihilation. This was treason, and it would have consequences. The Council's final decision. Humanity had become uncontrollable. Population was growing, knowledge was spreading, rebellion was inevitable. The gods debated one final solution: total reset. Not punishment, not control, erasure. The flood was proposed, a global catastrophe that would wipe the planet clean, destroy cities, erase memories, end resistance forever. Some gods objected, most agreed. The decision was made. The silence before the storm. Strange signs appeared in the sky. The stars shifted. The seas grew restless. Humans sensed something was wrong, but they did not know what was coming, except one, the god who defied the council. The secret warning against divine law. Enki warned a human, not openly, not directly, through dreams, through whispers. Instructions were given. A vessel was to be built. Life was to be preserved. This act ensured humanity's survival and sealed the fate of the gods' authority. The end of open rule. After the flood, the world was changed. Cities were gone, populations were shattered. Memories survived only as stories. The gods no longer ruled openly. They withdrew from direct contact. Humanity was left to rebuild alone, but forever changed. The legacy of rebellion. The rebellion of humanity did not end with survival. It became part of us. The refusal to submit, the hunger for knowledge, the instinct to question authority. These traits were once feared by the gods. They are now the foundation of civilization. Humanity was created to serve, but it chose to resist. The gods tried to erase their mistake. They failed. In the next chapter, we will witness the catastrophe meant to end humanity forever. The flood that reshaped Earth, memory and history itself. The decision had been made. Humanity would not be corrected. It would be erased. The Anunnaki Council believed the experiment had failed. The beings they had engineered to serve had learned too much, multiplied too quickly, and begun to challenge the natural order the gods had imposed. To the Anunnaki, this was not cruelty. It was containment. A plan beyond punishment. The flood was not conceived as an act of anger. It was designed as a solution. According to the ancient tablets, the Anunnaki understood celestial mechanics far better than humanity ever would. They knew that Nibiru's return into the inner solar system would destabilize Earth. Gravitational forces would shift. Ice caps would melt, seas would rise, the crust itself would tremble. This was predictable, and it was useful. Rather than prevent the catastrophe, the Anunnaki chose to allow it to happen. Earth would be cleansed, cities would vanish, knowledge would be lost, human resistance would be reduced to silence. When the waters receded, the gods could begin again. The argument among the gods, not all Anunnaki agreed. The tablets describe intense debate within the council. Some argued humanity was still valuable. Others believed humans had become a threat not just to Earth, but to the gods themselves. One argument appears again and again across cultures. If humanity survived, it would remember, and memory leads to rebellion. The final vote favoured destruction. A strict command was issued. No god was to warn humanity. No human was to survive. The fate of Earth was sealed. The god who broke the law, but one Anunnaki could not accept the verdict. Enki. He had been involved in humanity's creation. He understood their minds. He had watched them grow not just in number, but in awareness. To destroy humanity was to destroy his own work. But Enki was bound by divine law. He couldn't directly oppose the council, so he found another way. The warning through whispers. The ancient texts are careful here. Enki did not speak openly. He did not issue commands. Instead, he whispered. Through dreams, through symbolic language, through indirect instruction. A human was chosen. In Sumerian tablets, his name is Ziusudra. In the Bible, he becomes Noah. In other cultures, he appears under many names. Different stories, same man. He was told that a great deluge was coming, that the world would be destroyed, that life must be preserved. And most importantly, he was told how to survive, the vessel of survival. The instructions were precise. Measurements, materials, compartments. This was not folklore. It was engineering. The vessel was not designed to sail. It was designed to float, to endure chaos, to preserve life through catastrophe. Animals were gathered. Seeds were stored. Human knowledge was reduced to memory and survival. To the surrounding people, this preparation seemed insane. The skies were clear, or the land was fertile. No one believed him. The day the sky broke. When the flood came, it was sudden, not gentle rain, not seasonal flooding. The ancient texts describe the sky darkening, winds screaming, and waters erupting from the earth itself. Seas rose far beyond their natural limits. Rivers reversed their flow. Entire coastlines vanished in hours. Cities were swallowed. Temples collapsed. The works of gods and men alike disappeared beneath the water. Humanity screamed and then fell silent. The fear of the gods. One detail in the tablets is often overlooked. The gods were afraid. As the flood raged, the Anunnaki themselves retreated. Some fled to the heavens, others hid in high places. They had unleashed forces even they could not fully control. The texts describe gods weeping, gods starving, gods watching in horror as their own creations were destroyed. For the first time, the Anunnaki realized the cost of absolute power. The world underwater. For days, perhaps weeks, the earth was unrecognizable. No land, no cities, no borders, only water. The vessel drifted through silence. Inside, humanity waited, not knowing if the gods would allow them to live. The end of the deluge. When the waters finally began to recede, the world was empty. The mountains emerged scarred. The land was covered in mud and ruin. Nothing remained of the old world. Civilizations older than memory were gone. The gods had succeeded. Almost. The survivors step into a new world. The survivors emerged into a changed earth. No cities, no gods ruling openly, no instructions. Humanity was free but fragile. They carried fragments of memory, stories of gods, floods, punishment, and mercy. These stories would be told again and again, becoming myths, religions, warnings. The Anunnaki did not return to rule as before. Something had changed. The gods' withdrawal. After the flood, the gods made a decision. They would no longer walk openly among humans. Direct rule had failed. Humanity was too unpredictable, too emotional, too dangerous. Instead, the gods would rule indirectly through kings, priests, symbols, and bloodlines, and eventually they would leave. The loss of knowledge. With the flood, humanity lost more than cities. They lost memory. Advanced knowledge vanished. Techniques were forgotten. History was reduced to legend. Humanity had to start again. Stone replaced metal. Oral tradition replaced written record. This was not natural regression. It was enforced amnesia. The promise of return. The ancient tablets do not end with departure. They end with a warning. Nibiru would return, the gods would return with it, and humanity, no longer ignorant, no longer obedient, would face them again. The shadow that remained, even after their withdrawal, traces of the Anunnaki remained, monuments too precise to explain, astronomical knowledge too advanced for its time, symbols repeated across continents. The gods were gone, but their fingerprints were everywhere. He flood was meant to end humanity. It did not. It erased the past, but not the future. We will follow the Anunnaki after their departure, uncover what they left behind, and ask the most dangerous question of all: are they truly gone, or only waiting? When the waters finally withdrew and the world fell silent, something else vanished with them. The gods, not all at once, not dramatically, but deliberately. The Anunnaki did not announce their departure. They did not say farewell. They simply stepped back from the cities, from the temples, from the daily lives of humanity, and allowed time to erase their footprints. Or so it seemed. A world without gods. The survivors of the flood found themselves alone on a wounded planet. The skies were empty. The voices that once thundered commands from the heavens were gone. No more divine orders. No more visible masters. Humanity had never known true independence before. At first, this freedom was terrifying. The gods had dictated planting seasons, laws, punishments, and rituals. Without them, humans were forced to decide for themselves for the first time how to live. And yet, traces of divine rule lingered everywhere. Ruined temples stood half-buried in mud. Massive stone platforms rose where nothing should have existed. Symbols carved into stones spoke of a time when gods walked among men. The Anunnaki were gone, but they were not forgotten. The transformation of memory. Without the gods present to enforce truth, memory began to change. History softened into story, story hardened into myth, myth transformed into religion. Humanity did not stop believing in the gods. It reimagined them. The Anunnaki, once physical rulers, became distant deities, judges in the sky, creators beyond reach, moral overseers rather than administrators. This transformation was not accidental. It was necessary, because the truth that humanity had been engineered, enslaved, and nearly erased was too dangerous to preserve intact. The rise of priests and kings. Into the absence left by the gods stepped new authorities. Kings claimed divine descent. Priests claimed divine communication. Neither truly possessed it, but fragments of ancient knowledge remained. Rituals, symbols, calendars, astronomical alignments. Those who understood these fragments wielded power over those who did not. This was the new order, no longer ruled by gods directly, but ruled by humans who claimed the gods' legacy. The secret bloodlines. Ancient records speak quietly of something else that survived the flood. Blood. The Anunnaki did not leave Earth completely empty-handed. Some hybrid lineages remained, families whose ancestry traced back not only to humans, but to gods. These bloodlines became royalty, dynasties, pharaohs, god-kings. They ruled with an authority that felt inherited rather than earned. Even thousands of years later, rulers insisted on divine ancestry, because somewhere deep in human memory, the truth still stirred. The technologies that should not exist across the globe. Humanity rebuilt. But it rebuilt around mysteries, monuments aligned with stars, stone blocks weighing hundreds of tons, cut with impossible precision. Knowledge of precession, planetary cycles, and geometry far beyond primitive capability. Civilizations rose that appeared to remember more than they learned. Egypt, Sumer, the Indus Valley, Mesoamerica, each emerged suddenly. Each possessed advanced knowledge from the beginning. Each claimed instruction from gods who had come before. This was not coincidence. This was inheritance. The Watchers who never left, some ancient texts hint that not all Anunnaki departed. A small number remained behind. Observers, guardians, watchers. They did not rule, they did not teach openly. They watched. From mountains, from deserts, from places humanity avoided. These beings became angels, demons, spirits, or monsters in later traditions, distorted reflections of something once physical. Humanity sensed their presence long after their names were forgotten. The locked knowledge. The Anunnaki did not merely leave ruins behind. They sealed something. Ancient myths speak of forbidden chambers, hidden cities, locked vaults beneath the earth. Knowledge too dangerous for humanity at its current stage. Weapons, energy systems, records of true human origin. Whether these places still exist is unknown. But across cultures, explorers, priests, and rulers have searched for them. Some claimed to find them. Most never returned. The silencing of the past. As humanity advanced, something strange happened. Ancient knowledge was systematically dismissed. Myths were labelled primitive. Legends were stripped of historical value. The idea that gods walked the earth was reduced to metaphor. This was progress. But it was also erasure. Modern civilization prides itself on rationality, yet struggles to explain sudden leaps in ancient knowledge, global flood myths, and synchronized mythologies across isolated cultures. The past was buried again. This time, not by water, by disbelief. The return of the questions. In recent centuries, the questions resurfaced. Why do ancient texts describe technology? Why do gods behave like flawed beings rather than omnipotent spirits? Why do creation myths describe engineering rather than magic? Why does humanity feel unfinished? Science provided answers, but not all of them, and in the gaps between explanations, the whispers returned. The shadow of Nibiru. The name resurfaced. Nibiru. A wandering planet, a celestial cycle, a returning presence. Astronomers debate it, scientists dismiss it, ancient texts insist upon it. If Nibiru exists and if it returns, then the Anunnaki story does not belong to the past. It belongs to the future. The final question. If humanity was created as a tool and survived its creator's attempt to destroy it, and learned to think, rebel, and rebuild, then what are we now? Free or still part of a design we do not fully understand? Are we alone in the universe or merely unsupervised? The possibility that terrifies. Perhaps the Anunnaki left because they failed, or perhaps they left because humanity was not ready. Ancient texts never say the gods are gone forever. They say they will return when the time is right, when humanity is capable of meeting them not as slaves, but as equals or rivals. The whispers in the modern world. Today, humanity reaches for the stars. We search for exoplanets. We decode DNA. We build machines that think. We are doing what the gods once did, engineering life, shaping worlds, playing creator. Perhaps this was always the plan. Perhaps humanity was never meant to remain a servant. Perhaps we were meant to inherit the role of the gods. The warning left behind. The ancient stories are not just records, they are warnings. Power without wisdom leads to destruction. Knowledge without restraint invites catastrophe. Creators must answer for their creations. The Anunnaki learned this lesson. The question is, will we? the story that never ends. The story of gods and men did not end with the flood. It did not end with the departure. It continues in every human who questions origin, authority, and destiny. The Anunnaki may be gone, or watching, or waiting, but their greatest creation was not humanity's body. It was humanity's mind, and that cannot be erased. Final whisper. If you have listened this far, you are part of the echo. Like this video so the truth can travel further. Share it with someone who listens beyond history. Subscribe to Whispers of the World, where ancient voices still speak. And before you leave, tell us in the comments, which country are you watching from, and the time. The gods once watched humanity. Now humanity watches the stars and waits.